Hello, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and today we are talking with Joy Bivins. She is the new director of the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. We are thrilled that she has come all the way from South Carolina, where she was curator of the International African American Museum, doing their curating for that fantastic museum that's opened up. She is now bringing all of those talents to the Schomburg. And Joy, thanks so much for being with us today.
I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so much praise, in the announcement of your coming, saying that you had everything. You had storytelling ability. You knew the objects. You knew how to reach people, and you know what history means to the present and the future. So, talk to us a little bit about what you think you're bringing and want to bring to the Schomburg.
Really great question. It feels like an interview question, and I'm gonna try to answer that. First of all, I'm really happy to be here and to be with you. And the thing that I think is most critical when I present myself or present anything that the Schomburg is doing, any of my previous positions, is the presence of the past, right? So history has happened, but history still lives with us. And the objects, the archives, the paintings, the films, the recordings are really the evidence of that past. And they, at best, help us to understand our present. And so when you talk about storytelling and understanding objects for me are always most important when they help illuminate what's going on today. And the Schomburg Center has been collecting for the past 95 years, so that not only do we represent what has happened to us or with us as people of African descent, but also that we understand that past so that it can provide a light for the future. And so in thinking about what we do, the work that we do, how we do it, what is critical to us, what is of utmost importance, it is providing the evidence of our brilliance, of our creativity, and making sure that that evidence is secure and available for future generations. So when we talk about objects, that is where their power lies. When we talk about the Schomburg Center, that is where our power lies. It is in the documentation of who we are as people of African descent.
And speaking of the objects, some 11 million, if not more by now, but 11 million is plenty. That's a lot of
it is
that have been collected so far. Now, usually when we're talking about museums and centers and whatever, we're thinking really about the distant past. But this recent past of ours has been so extraordinary and so stressful, from the Black Lives Matter, the George Floyd, the pandemic, and now having to fight for voting rights, all of those things, the essence of which resides at the Schomburg, the history of it, and what we're hoping is the future of it.
Absolutely, and that future is digital. And that future requires a different thought pattern for how to collect the present, right? So a lot of the work that we've been doing over the last year and a half during the pandemic is really documenting what Black folks are doing in the digital sphere. What do digital archives look like? And in many ways, they can be more robust than the text, the papers, which we have a lot of, as you just mentioned, the 11 million, but that is compounded in the online space. And so we've been doing a lot of work looking at what Black people have been saying about not just the events of 2020 with Black Lives Matter and the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, but also what has our experience been through the pandemic, because it's been different. It's different in Harlem than it is in other parts of Manhattan, that experience of COVID-19. Likewise, it's different in Africa than it is here in the States or in parts of the Caribbean. And so Black people are always documenting their experiences, and that's something that we've been trying to archive as well.
Well, one of the delights for me is that for the first time in a long time, although we had two really terrific guys, you know, who have been directors there, you know, Khalil Muhammad, who's gone off to Harvard, and Kevin Young, who's now running the Smithsonian, but Jane Blackwell Hudson, who started this whole enterprise. You're the first woman director in a long time. So let's celebrate that for a moment.
It's worth celebrating, right? So Miss Blackwell Hudson, her tenure at the Schomburg ended in 1980. And after her, there was Howard Dotson, then Dr. Muhammad, and then Kevin Young. So we have had a really august kind of history of people who've led the Schomburg Center. And really the foundation was laid by the late Jean Blackwell Hudson, who turned what was a struggling library into a center, a research library that not only served the community, the Harlem community, but served the larger world, and really became the home for so many collections, so many objects from other parts of the diaspora. So it is in her direction that I'm looking as I think about what the future of the Schomburg Center will be. And as we, you know, we've had some really fabulous collecting that's gone on over the last several years, and I would really like to open that up and see how we can explore other parts of the diaspora. What does it mean to collect from the Caribbean, or from Latin America, or from the continent? Does it mean physically collecting? What are our other options as we think about collecting in the 21st century? What are the shared opportunities between institutions here and in other parts of the Black world where we can really strengthen our understanding of our past and our present, as well as our future? It's always that, to me, history that is not about the future is, you know, it's just nostalgia, and we don't need that. We need models that can help us deal with what we're dealing with today. And so when you talk about voting rights and Black Lives Matter, what we have in our collections really speaks to how our ancestors organized and fought for the issues of their day. And again, we're looking for who are those people that are doing it now that are really going to become, you know, part of the canon, part of the repository. And so we're always, hopefully, this is my hope, this is my endeavor, really thinking about the future and who comes after us.
Right. Well, you know, of course, almost everybody does their research at the Schomburg. You know, I did it for the book that my daughter and I did. And I love the story of your coming in to research your PhD paper. What was the topic, and what were you looking for in the Schomburg 20 years ago? Right?
20 years ago. Actually, it was, I want to make sure that I'm clear, it was for my master's thesis while I was at Cornell. And I was looking at the ways in which African-American publications, visual publications, mostly magazines, presented a resistance or a counter narrative to some of the images that we're seeing of Black women in dominant media. So my thesis was really about the ways in which African Americans constructed different visualizations of Black womanhood. And that served me very well throughout my career, not just coming to this particular position, but I had the opportunity to kind of go back in my own archive when I worked on an exhibition about the Ebony Fashion Fair, which was really kind of a fantastical way of reviewing or rethinking Black life. So.
Right. Well, we need you to update that. You know, I mean, that's an ongoing issue that needs to be explored. So I understand that the Schomburg is going to put up its first permanent exhibit. Talk to us a little bit about what that what that means. Is it treasures? Is that?
Sure. So the Schomburg, at the center specifically, we do rotating exhibitions, but our collections are being featured in the New York the larger library's permanent exhibition, which is called Treasures. And what that exhibition does is it pulls from all of our special collections, so from the Schomburg Center, Library of Performing Arts, the Schwartzman collections, and it is the compilation, or it comprises about 4,000 years of human history. So there are 250 objects in this exhibition, which opens on September 24th. And a good percentage of those are treasures from the Schomburg Center's collection. But you do put a good idea in my head. Maybe that's something that we need to think about doing at the Schomburg Center, because we have such riches and we want to share them.
You do. I was looking at some of the things that you've contributed in the Green Book. You have the largest collection of the fabulous Green Books. And for the audience who may not know, that it once upon a time was, and perhaps still, dangerous for Black people to be traveling and finding accommodations. And why don't you pick up the story of the Green Books from
Sure. So, it is still can be daunting to travel across the country. One doesn't learn this until you try to do it, and you are trying to navigate where you should be or where you might not want to be. But of course, in our past, it could be deadly to find yourself in the wrong part of the nation, or in a sundown town, or out where you couldn't get gas or you couldn't get fuel as you were traveling by car across the nation. So, as we always do, answering questions that we have, providing answers for needs that we have as a people, the Green Books were produced to provide travelers with guideposts, if you will, of where they could get accommodations, where they could have their meal, what to avoid, what to see as they made their way across the United States. And they came out just as the interstate highway system was formulating, and this was a new thing for Americans to get in their cars and travel the country, but it wasn't always safe for people of African descent. And so, in order to help folks, these books were produced and helped people as they traveled to and fro across the highway.
Right. And they are wonderful to go through and look at year after year to see what establishments are up and what was available. And if you don't know what sundown town means, it's essentially you better be out of town before the sun goes down.
Before the sun goes down, we don't want to see after that. Yeah.
Literally. Now, one of the things that I am so eager to do is to come in. I did not know that you had as much James Baldwin and Malcolm X and all of this material there. Talk to us a little bit about what you have from, let's say, James Baldwin.
So, yeah, the Baldwin papers are really a crown jewel of our collection, as are Malcolm X's papers, as are Dr. Maya Angelou's papers, Sonny Rollins' papers. Over the last several years, we've been really busy bringing in kind of the giants of our culture. And so within the James Baldwin papers, you can find manuscripts, you can find unfinished manuscripts, notes, anything that Baldwin produced ultimately is within, or the scripts for what he produced is within this collection, and is one of the collections that is highly, highly used. One of the things that, folks make appointments to utilize this collection. And there are so many more like that, not necessarily as large, but still as significant as James Baldwin's papers. But he really is, kind of one of our great spirits in the Schomburg, and we are fortunate to steward his collection.
Right. And I noticed that you've got Ann Petrie as well, a name not as well known as James Baldwin, but should be,
Absolutely.
Magnificent. In fact, I was just reading, Ann, it's a totally fine tiny print. What a prolific writer, you know. I mean, like a 400-page novel was nothing, you know. So, I mean, so lesser known lights, but people who should be, you know, high in our consciousnesses have been created, you know, such wonderful gifts for, you know, for our culture. If you had to think of someone who's not in the collection that you would love to get in the collection, who's on your, what's on your list? What are you?
Oh,
what are
I
you
have a long list, Carol.
I sort of thought, I thought that.
I have a long list, and you know, I enjoy working with the curators to shape that list. Because we have so many different formats that we collect in. It's not just the archives and the papers, but the moving image, recorded sound, painting, sculpture, which are part of our art and artifacts division, and then of course photographs and print. So you know, there's a robustness to our collection that means that we have to be really particular kind of about what we pursue in the future. And I am hoping to somehow secure Cicely Tyson's papers.
Ah, right.
I
So
mean, it
wonderful.
feels right, right? It's
Right. She
right that it,
belongs, she belongs
yeah,
at Schomburg. Yeah.
yes. And so we are always thinking about people who have international, national impact, but also a home is Harlem, you know, or a home is New York City. Because that local is important, I think, when telling stories. So unfortunately, she's gone on to glory, and you know, I think when she passed, I was like, you know, that we should go for that one.
Right, right. Well, I think one of the things that fooled us all is that she was so full of life, you know,
Hmm.
up until the very, you know, the very end. And her book, you know, came out, it seemed like
Right.
almost simultaneously. So, you know, I can remember seeing her a year or 2 or 3 years ago and on fire, just wonderful. So
Hmm.
I hope your dream comes true. We'd love
Yeah,
to
it's a
be
dream. Hmm.
to access it. So how are people accessing the Schomburg now, given, you know, the pandemic still not totally erased? We're
Hmm.
having to deal with it a bit as we record, you know, this conversation.
Right, because we would be together in person if it were not for the pandemic. Well, at this point, the pandemic, while it slowed us down, it hasn't stopped us. And it's important, I think, to always note that while we were at home, we were still doing a lot of work. But now we're back in the building, and our reading rooms are open, most of them 5 days a week, 11 to 5. For Jean Blackwell Hudson, the General Research Division, you don't need an appointment. You can just come to the library and use our resources. All of our exhibitions are open, free, and all day, you know, 10:45 to 5:45. So we are open. Divisions like photographs and prints and manuscripts, archives, and rare books, you have to make an appointment, but you can still access materials right now. And as long as things continue on an upward trajectory,
Yes.
we look forward to being even more fully open in the next couple months.
So I did want to ask, because you've come from the International African American Museum, which, you know, are much concentrated on the transatlantic slavery.
Hmm. Hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about that and how that work, you know, leads into what the Schomburg has in that same area.
Sure. So the International African American Museum is coming. It'll be open soon in
22, yeah.
Charleston. Yes, Charleston, South Carolina, located at Gadsden's Wharf, which in Charleston was the primary kind of disembarkation mark for people coming from the continent, right? So Charleston is really the biggest market for Africans coming from the continent and into American slavery. So in terms of the connection between the International African American Museum and the Schomburg hosts or has a collection called the Lapidus Collection, which really is a part of the Lapidus Center for the Analysis of Transatlantic Slavery, which not only collects objects related to transatlantic slavery, but also produces scholarship. So for instance, in early October, we'll be hosting a conference, a virtual conference, the Lapidus Center Conference, and which really looks at pandemic legacies, and so health and healing during the transatlantic period or transatlantic slave trade. And how, again, going back to the International African American Museum, I want to call it IAM because we used to call it that all the time.
Right.
So that museum endeavors to connect the experience of people of African descent back to the continent, but also to the other parts of the diaspora, right? So this is also a project that is about the diaspora. It also is a project that is about the beginnings of Black American culture, because 40%, at least 40% of Africans who arrived in the United States arrived in Charleston. And then that community grew over the years. So by the time that slavery was abolished, or the beginning of the Civil War in 1861, the US's enslaved population was 4 million, and the largest in this new world. So we really were trying to place Charleston as kind of the genesis of a new kind of culture, of which the Schomburg collects objects related to these new cultures, but also the continent. So Black American, Caribbean, Latin American, South American, any place that people of African descent have made their mark, we look at making sure that we can document them at the Schomburg Center.
Right. And,
so it's
and
an interesting connection there.
Right, right. And you definitely are the expert in all of that, which is good news for the Schomburg. And you're giving out a Harriet Tubman Award for nonfiction. Is that? Talk to us a little bit about that.
So the curator of Lapidus Center, Dr. Michelle Commander, oversees a literary award that we give out. I think this is biannually, the Harriet Tubman Award. And it really looks at the best scholarship that's coming out about the transatlantic slavery, whether that be, again, US based or in other parts of the diaspora. And I think all of the books this year are really looking more specifically at the Caribbean. So, you know, we are trying to live up to our reputation as representing not just Black Americans, but other parts of the diaspora where people of African descent live.
Right, so that you, if things go well for all of us, you will be running the Schomburg at the 100-year anniversary.
Yeah, I hope it because that well. I want to be here for that. Yeah,
right. I know. So you only have what, 3 years to plan for that? What does that look like? A full 100 years of Schomburg collected?
So, you know, I want to put one more year on that. So we have 1 more year.
Okay, you want the time. Okay. Great.
Yeah, I need the time. But it's the right time, right? So now is the right time to lay all those seeds, plant all those seeds, so that in 2025 we can be harvesting and they can all come to fruition. And so one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is just a really robust programming schedule, a really robust exhibition schedule that, again, highlights the treasures from the Schomburg Center's collection. I'm looking at, you know, one major acquisition for each of our divisions, each of our 5 divisions. I'm looking at what our website will look like, or what our web presence will look like. But ultimately, you know, we will have to do a publication or 2 that
Or straight, right?
or
Yeah.
yeah, one that is more coffee table book. I'm
Right.
putting this out here in the universe because I know that we can do it. But also, we have to speak these things into existence. More of these are the beauties, the crown jewels of our collection, but also a book that really explores the significance of the Schomburg Center and its importance within kind of a network of institutions that are about the business of documenting and preserving Black culture. So,
I
yeah,
can't
I
wait.
can't either.
I want to be at all of those things, and I definitely want the books, many copies of them.
Many
Big
copies.
coffee table, right? It's terrific. I cannot wait. I am so glad that you are in charge of creating that. We'll give you the full 4 years.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I so appreciate it.
Collected and published and all of that. And Joy Bivins, welcome back to New York and to the Schomburg. And thank you for everything you're presenting to our community here in Harlem. And we look forward to your major accomplishments. So
thank you so much. It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks to you all out there for being with us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and we will see you the next time.